gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable, and this week we're talking about B2B marketing lessons from No Doubt, to help with special guest, Director of Product Marketing at GetResponse, Hehemann.
Hi everyone, Michael Hayes from Quad 106.5 with me, the band No Doubt from Southern California. And the lead singer, Gwen Stefani, is right here. Right on.
This is our first record. This is our second time out on tour.
Hi, I'm Tony, and I play bass in the band No Doubt.
Tom, play guitar.
I'm Adrian Young. I play drums.
Abby, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to chat GetResponse, marketing, content, everything in between. But starting off, why the heck did you pick No Doubt to talk about today?
Yeah, transparently, No Doubt, they are on my Workday Spotify playlist that honestly may be like a psychopath. I listen to every day, no shuffle, the same order, the same songs. So No Doubt,
really?
Definitely. I do. I've heard.
That's awesome.
The reason I asked psychopath point, because I think I've read that somewhere on the internet that's like super psychopathic behavior. But I don't know. It's just my way. But so I've got a couple No Doubt songs that, hit me at the top of my work hour, and then one that kind of brings me home. So definitely No Doubt is intrinsically linked, I would say, to my professional life and my professional experience, and generally top of mind. So they definitely came to mind when thinking about, what we could talk about. And then generally, I think there's a lot of really cool parallels that maybe we'll dive into today about, Gwen Stefani, this kind of evolution that the band has had. I think there's a lot of cool parallels that it looks like we could explore. And I just generally really like their tunes. So it came up.
I love it. That is so awesome. I listen to the same like 3 or 4 songs very often because of the YouTube algorithm. So my son loves the movie Cars, and he loves listening to Life is a Highway. So we listen to Life is a Highway, and then he loves Elton John's. Well, actually, technically, it's not the Elton John version, but he loves what he calls the song Time, but that is not the actual name of the song. It's I'm Still Standing. And so I listen to those 2 songs pretty much every single day in successions. So, and you know what? I don't get sick of them, funny enough.
I know, with songs that are good enough, you can hear them every day, in my opinion. So that's definitely my experience with No Doubt since I've been, a preteen.
I love it. That's so awesome. Okay. And then tell us about your role at GetResponse.
So GetResponse is an email and marketing automation platform. We've been in the email marketing game since like 1998, which is, total No Doubt heyday period, let's be honest. But, we offer affordable, easy to use marketing automation, email marketing, and subscriber list tools. And with me, as Director of Product Marketing, I'm managing a team of product marketers, and we act as basically the translator between the product and the market. And we're really focused on supporting our customer-facing teams to tell a powerful story, both in ways that we're going to help our team win, right? How we execute on powerful storytelling to help us achieve our business goals. But it's super related to how we execute on content, on how we're really focused on helping our customers win, how we enable them with the information that they need to be successful with their email and online marketing strategies, and how they may or may not use our software to do so.
Meredith, what the heck is No Doubt?
So for this one, we're going back to 1986.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
So travel with me to a Dairy Queen in Southern California. And here we're going to meet Eric and his younger sister, Gwen. And they're chatting with their friend, John. They all work together at this Dairy Queen about how much they love ska bands, specifically British ska bands like The Madness, The English Beat, and The Specials.
The first time I heard about ska music was because my older brother came home with this Madness record. It just kind of took over.
And together they're like, wouldn't it be awesome to start a band?
There was a guy in my high school called John Spence who was this kid that was just wanted to be in a band really bad. And he's the one that told my brother, you got to get keyboards so we can do this band, the ska band.
And so John would be lead vocals, Gwen would be backup, and Eric would be on keyboards. And they're like, well, what do we call it? And John had this phrase that he would say in conversation often, which was, no doubt, like in agreement with people, right?
A guy that used to sing with us, which doesn't anymore, he used to say this word.
No doubt.
Right. And so now that's the word we use.
And so that ended up sticking for their band name. But sadly, about a year later, John dies by suicide. And so he ends up not being the lead vocalist and the band breaks up. But about a month later, they were talking again and like,
We all sat down and we all really discussed it, and everybody decided, John would have wanted us to keep going, and he wouldn't want us to stop.
And so in talking about this, they were like, who would be in our band? And so they ended up bringing in bassist Tony Canal, guitarist Tom Dumont, who was actually part of a heavy metal band called Rising, and this drummer Adrian Young, who is actually known for playing nude.
It's just become part of the whole No Doubt experience, Adrian being naked.
Anything that can make us laugh, we all encourage each other to do, so it always works.
And then they were like, Gwen would take on lead vocals. And I guess she was like super, super shy, but her brother Eric was like, come on, like you can do it. And so he was really, prompting her to take on lead vocals and gave her confidence.
Eric was like the leader, and he would just influence all of us. He would just force me to go in there and sing while he played the piano.
And so they ended up touring up and down the West Coast with bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers. They got signed to Interscope Records in 1990.
We went with Interscope because they're really hands-off. They're going to let us do anything we want to do creatively and just let us evolve as a band and grow and mature.
And they ended up releasing their self-titled album about 2 years later, which actually didn't do that well. And it wasn't until about like their second album came out, which was actually just outtakes in 1993, that they started gaining momentum. And her brother Eric actually ended up leaving the band to become an animator on Ren and Stimpy and The Simpsons. And as a funny aside, the episode entitled Homerpalooza has a cameo of No Doubt drawn by Eric Stefani. So they make a cameo in The Simpsons, which I thought was cool. But their big break didn't come until the release of their next album, Tragic Kingdom, which they released in 1995. So they've been going for a while, right? Almost a decade. And they're just, becoming super popular. So that's when their song, Just a Girl, Don't Speak, those were on that album.
I'm just a girl in the
world. And most of the songs were inspired by the breakup of Gwen and the bassist Tony.
When Tony broke up with me, and then when Eric left the band, that is when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I start writing songs. I don't know how to write them. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't play an instrument. And that's where I finally found that passive girl was gone. And it was like, I found a focus and I found a power.
And Gwen told People magazine, I'm never going to write anything that's not just completely reflective of what's going on in my life.
I remember when I wrote Happy Now, and I was so proud of it. I was like, God, it's exactly what I'm feeling.
So she wrote from a lot of her personal experience, and I think that's what really clicked with people. So Abby, I'm wondering if that's kind of you grew up with Gwen, basically. Do you feel like that sort of thing really clicked for you, or what was it that really stuck with you about her music?
Yeah, I would say so. And honestly, before I really knew what music was, my recollection was the men in my life kind of had control of the radio and the music I heard. And I'm from Arkansas. And so it was a lot of country music and a lot of, men and pretty masculine, I would say, experiences with music and seeing that represented. And then all of a sudden I remember No Doubt. And I just saw this really powerful woman singing this amazing song, Don't Speak is such a catchy tune. And then to see that really powerful album cover, I remember begging my mother to buy that, and then seeing the music video, which was in the ultimate era, I would say, in the 90s of music videos when they were the best. And just seeing that, I really resonated. And I just loved seeing this beautiful, strong woman really kind of taking over the scene and the stage, and seeing these guys kind of back her and really kind of play a supportive role, I would say, into this woman that was very strong. And then just, having this incredible stage presence definitely spoke to me, I would say. So that was a really cool kind of transition into seeing that kind of representation, I would say, in music, and definitely caught my eye as a young gal.
Definitely. And On that note, I was curious about her writing process too, because I'm like, how is she? Because she was the one really writing the lyrics and everything. And I guess once Eric left the band, it was her voice that really took over. And so Tom Dumont, her bandmate, said she had a notebook of ideas. And this was an idea of hers about coming to terms with growing up and seeing what challenges there were in being a female and growing up. And he said there was sort of this sarcastic take on it. And she wasn't just singing like girl power. She was singing it in such a clever and sarcastic way. Eric, pulling away from the band, left a space for Gwen to start writing words about her life rather than just singing words about Eric's life.
My parents were quite strict with me, and I was living at home even into my 20s. And I would have to come home and like knock on my parents' door. And it was frustrating because I was already like older, you know what I mean? But it got me also sort of like paranoid about the fact that why? I can remember thinking, wow, I'm in a car right now. I'm driving home. It's like 1 a.m. And if something did happen to me, I'm vulnerable because I'm a girl. And then you start to think, wow, okay, maybe people actually look at me different because I am a female. And so I just wanted to write a song to express how I was feeling in that moment.
And I was like, yes, like she is so powerful and has such a powerful presence. And they did end up putting out total 6 albums, but there was like a significant break in there. After the 2004 tour, Gwen went off and did her own. She released 2 solo albums. Then Tom Dumont also went solo too. But they came back together in 2008 for their 6th album, Push and Shove. And that was released in 2012. So it took them a while to write that. And I guess it was like a real struggle to get that last one out. Gwen said she was just like trying to write late at night after taking care of her kids, designing for her fashion label and working out. So she said between 5 p.m. and midnight was when she was writing. And she told Q Magazine that's the horror of any creative person, to have to be creative between certain times. And she said Prince had given her advice once, and he said, do you ever just try to write a hit song, instead of trying to be all arty about it, which I thought was really interesting. So there were a couple of like lessons I feel like I took from all of this, which is like write based on your own experience, or if you're writing for a certain audience, like get their firsthand experience so that you can really speak to that. Give the people what they want, right? Like Prince had said, like, just, write to be popular, and then work your inspirations into your style. So for No Doubt, it was punk and ska. And for Gwen, I thought like her personal style, like No Doubt wouldn't be No Doubt without Gwen as the lead person. I always thought I liked watching her like old interviews because she has such a funky style. She didn't have a stylist. Like she was just dressing herself.
I think that the reason why I started making clothes for myself was because I think fashion is kind of like an extension of your personality, and I've always kind of been crazy about having things that that no one else has.
And so like she dyed her own hair blonde. For a while it was blue, for a while it was pink, right? She wore a bindi for a while, which was given to her by her bassist mom, who's Indian.
I was just so unbelievably fascinated by Indian culture in particular because Tony Kanal, who was my boyfriend at the time, he's the bass player of No Doubt, is Indian, from India. And I had never, growing up in Anaheim, spent any time with anyone from India. And his mom would come down the stairs ready to go to these like Indian parties, all dolled up with a bindi and jewelry and these beautiful like fabric dresses and with patterns and gold. And I would just be like, I've never seen anything like it. And so she gave me a lot of bindis, and I just was like, hey, what's up? Boom.
And she knew a girl who could make clothes, so she would like commission her for cool pants and stuff like that. So I was like, this is so cool. But those were just a couple of the lessons that I sort of took from that. But I know, Abby, when we had sort of communicated earlier, that like you had mentioned that No Doubt has gone from like ska to more of like popular pop music and still stayed like very relevant, very popular. So I'm wondering like where in your mind did they make that transition, and what made that possible for them to still stay popular?
Yeah, it's such a specific avenue that a lot of us take. And if we think about, representation in our like B2B SaaS world, but understanding what makes you special and authentic and unique. And then you have to make some pretty big bets on how can I kind of expand this offering? How can I expand this audience in a way that's still true to what makes me special, us special, this band, this organization, this product, this organization, but still speak to a wider audience. And that's definitely, I think, a huge art. I think you get super lucky more than a science on making the right calls, on deciding to do that particular event or that particular song or, that particular new campaign that you're experimenting with. as your bet to the way that we're going to be able to expand this audience and be able to actually go further than just this like ska punk era, right? But still look like us. And that was what I think what was unique with them is they definitely kind of went from that ska punk era to this kind of more pop general songs, but it still looked like No Doubt. They still looked the same, right? It still had Gwen as the she still had a unique look compared to maybe others in the scene, but their songs or kind of the sound spoke maybe to a kind of different, more wider audience. And I guess that just comes from making the right decisions on who they partnered with. I mean, so much when we come to like our B2B organizations, like who do we partner with? Who are we affiliating ourselves with? Who are we saying we're associated with these folks? Because that says a lot about who you are. And I think they probably had to make those decisions on their producers or, you know, different songwriters or the different ways in which they evolve their sound. And it's risky, right? It's risky to kind of go from what they're known for and what's safe and then take some bets and trying something different to get to a wider audience. And it seems like they made the right calls on staying authentic to some core, but then expanding to things in a sound that they thought was more kind of widely popular potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's sort of, as with many stories that we cover here, there's areas of, you know, tragedy and serendipity and, you know, all sorts of other things. But I think it's interesting to me that sort of in her own way, she was able to sort of like take control and take direction of this whole thing over time. If you were to look at it, you know, right now, you're like, surely Gwen Stefani started her own band that she was the lead singer of, that she was going to like, surely that must have happened, right? And that's not what happened. And that she sort of like earned her voice over time. And I think it's just a great lesson that, you know, the overnight success, you know, spending 4 years in the desert and going through what she went through, you know, would probably make a lot of people quit. And then in addition to that, just sort of like changing the nature of the band and, you know, how she sang and what they were doing. And it's pretty crazy that, so they get signed in 1990 and it, you know, their big break is like 5 years later. Still, again, that's a long time to have a big hit like that.
Yeah, and I think that comes to what so much is essential with branding, with giving things time. I mean, the high growth expectations that we live in this like B2B SaaS world is just like exponential growth tomorrow. And there's so much that comes with good content, good branding, good marketing strategies that you have to be such a good communicator with executive leadership or investors that oftentimes it's just not the reality. And that's proven time and time again with really strong brands or really strong bands, basically, that it takes time. It takes time to find your unique voice in a particular market that's going to make you stand out and make you have the success. And you just can't bet on some one thing that's going to make you an overnight success. And I think it's so cool that we see that example over and over again, that when you dig into super successful companies, SaaS organizations, or bands, they were doing their thing for multiple years before you knew about them. And I think that's really important context to share more broadly, because there's so much expectation for startups that, you know, go from hire number 2 to hire number 50 because they got a round of funding, and then they're expected to go hyper growth in the next 6 to 9 months. And it's just oftentimes not at all realistic or possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're relying on expectations to be your predictor of the future, right? It's pretty bad. Yeah. Nobody knows what the future is going to hold, but you know, and you definitely don't know. You know, man, I think it's also interesting that like if you were to close up shop today in your marketing shop and say, hey, I'm going to spend 2 years, we're not going to do a single thing other than one studio album, and you came out and you made a hit as big as what they did with Tragic Kingdom. And some of the songs, like, you know, it would be a massive success. Now, marketing is not like that. You know, it's not like, you know, you just fold up shop for 2 years. But, you know, if you're a writer or a musician or anything like that, it is. And I just think it's great work takes time, truly. Yeah. And you can tell by, you know, even later in her career where she's been there, done that, had her own solo career, done all this other stuff. And she's still sitting there trying to figure out, it's a new challenge, trying to figure out how to go to the gym and go to work every day. And boy, doesn't that sound familiar. I don't make it to the gym, so shout out to her.
Shout out to Gwen for that, no doubt.
Okay, what are your 3 B2B marketing lessons?
Yeah, so definitely the first would be this authenticity and distinctive branding. I think we talked a bit about this with Meredith's really good kind of historical example of, you know, Gwen really doing what she needed to do to stand out, whether it felt authentic to her or it was just kind of a calculated bet that this is going to be something that's going to resonate. But I definitely think that stood out, right? Not just being kind of a woman fronting this male band in a pretty masculine industry and definitely genre of music and like punk basically stood out. And I think that's what B2B content marketing gets such a bad rap for, is just sea of sameness, super boring, not distinctive. Everybody talking about like driving revenue and getting more leads. And it's just, you don't know who's saying it. It doesn't even matter. There's no distinctive tone of voice, point of view, who's talking about what. And I think that definitely points to the need for that level of authenticity. I think that's what we're craving as humans, even though we're representing companies purchasing software in a lot of scenarios, is that we're still wanting to make those level of connections and actually have some elements in our brain that recognize, oh, this is an actual human being I'm trying to do business with, and they understand what my motivations are representing this company. And I want to see that reflected in the way they execute in their content or the ways in which they're trying to communicate with me. And so that's definitely such a huge reminder, I think, for all of us that execute in this space, is be human, be authentic, have something to say. And so, for example, right now at GetResponse with our team, we're seeing that opportunity on YouTube in the way in which to execute on our content. This is a way that we can actually present human beings trying to connect with other humans on YouTube to communicate marketing tactics, trends, news in our industry that they need to know. We see with our audience, they don't have the time to read through long, ebooks and blog posts and these types of things. They need information, and they seem to want it from a human in an interesting, funny, authentic way. And so we've doubled down on that this year, and it's working. And it makes sense, right? Even though it's about marketing and different email marketing regulations, it's authentic. And it's just a human saying, hey, let me level with you. This is some new complicated stuff coming down from Google. Here's what you need to know. And it's just working better. So just that authenticity, something to say in a human way to say it, I think is just an interesting, nice thing to kind of remind ourselves. And I think, no doubt, and Gwen Stefani's execution of that was a great example.
One thing about the authenticity and distinct branding here for me is that, so number one, she had a quote recently where she was talking about how it's hard for her to listen to the songs that she wrote back then, not because they're bad or she, whatever, was because she is like, it takes me back to the mistakes that I was making at the time, because they're actually about her life, right? And isn't that so funny, right? If you were to go back and read like a blog post that you wrote from a B2B perspective, you might be embarrassed about like the topic or the quality or whatever, but it's not like part of your life, right? And that's like part of the problem is when we're creating B2B content, so often it is not part of our life or somebody's life that is making mistakes, that are like making mistakes in public or that are sharing these things. Not that you need to air all of your mistakes, but the idea of like, that is what authenticity is, right? You share the good with the bad. You share the parts of your life that where you're vulnerable or, whatever. And that's like what artists are doing. And it's just something that we don't do in B2B marketing. So I think that, that piece of it is really interesting.
It's super true. And it would be cool if we could find a way, I guess, to be able to like admit fault or admit something differently. That's this issue, I think, with like corporate communications that we've got, right? Where it's so kind of sanitized that there are a bunch of humans running this company and there's a bunch of humans making mistakes that honestly should be embarrassing for a lot of folks. But we kind of put this corporate veil, I guess, over the representation of that type of mistake, that there's not like an individual, which I can see pros and cons of obviously that approach in different scenarios. But we often then, when times get tough, we kind of put the shutters down and make it be corporate rather than individual. And I think maybe some of the best folks representing B2B orgs, they're human, put the founder, put the CEO front facing to say, hey, I made this mistake. This was an error. And I think that's the only potential parallel we could make to somebody like, Gwen talking about a bad breakup or a way she handled, a romantic relationship gone wrong, is if like founders or CEOs or folks in true leadership actually put themselves forth as an individual that potentially have made, some errors rather than the corporate shield. It's not super common.
No, totally. I agree. And I think that that's where like allowing your community to be able to share their mistakes, that's why community is so valuable, right? Is people can be transparent. That's why when you have those events where it's the, whatever, Chatham House rules or whatever, where it's no recordings and people can just share the mistakes. That's why those are so powerful, right? Because we just want to hear real speak. We want people to be able to speak freely about like, hey, yeah, this vendor is awesome. We really love them. But guess what? Implementation absolutely sucked. And it was the worst 6 months of my career. And once we got rolling, it was great, but like that, to me, that makes me feel better as a buyer to know that I know that where the downsides could be, or I know that, to set realistic expectations. So maybe sub one there is create spaces where people can actually speak truthfully. The other thing is about branding. So I remember that No Doubt album cover. Now, back then, your album cover is so important, like a podcast cover, where your album is like part of the reason why people notice you, part of the reason why, they buy it. And to me, seeing her, Gwen Stefani, on the Tragic Kingdom cover in the like short red dress, kind of looking almost like a pinup girl. And then the juxtaposition of that being like, oh, she's this like, like rocker girl or whatever, this, ska musician. To me, it always felt like that was the thing that was like so cool about her and about them and about all this is like a little bit weird, a little bit out there, but like it's this person who is super confident in herself that they're playing with this sort of like blonde pinup, red lipstick, red dress. And she has this like ridiculous voice and is so cool. And like, I feel like playing with people, playing with their sort of expectations or playing with things visually in a way that, allows you to sort of pull one over them on or whatever is really interesting. And like, you got to lead with the thing that's most interesting, right? Is we have a female lead vocalist. We're probably the only, more or less, one of the only ska bands like that. And she's freaking badass. So like, we're going to lead with that. She's going to be front and center on the cover. The 1992 album, No Doubt, is literally just the words No Doubt. So I think that's just like, it's a little bit of the point to the thing that makes you and sort of use other people's perceptions to kind of like own your own story.
Totally. Yeah, agree. I remember seeing that cover and just like forcing my mother to buy that CD for me because I thought, oh my God, I loved it. And I loved that she's holding this, is it like an orange or a peach? It looks like a dried piece of fruit with holes in it. And I was like, that's weird.
I don't know what it is either. I was trying to figure it out. I thought it looks like it's dice from afar, but it's definitely some sort of, or maybe are they oranges because of Orange County maybe? And then it's like a dead orange tree in a field maybe.
Yeah. So that juxtaposition, because she's really beautiful and eye-catching, but she's holding this and it seems really intentional and it caught my eye as well. Not just this like, beautiful, strong woman on the cover, but it definitely, that's what led me to there, was seeing that. And then of course the music video, which was amazing.
All right. So next, what's your number 2 takeaway?
Yeah. Number 2 is definitely then like the adaptation and evolution. We spoke on it a little bit, I guess, about their evolution from kind of, the niche ska punk era to this more general kind of pop era that they ended in. But they managed it, right? And that's the big evolution that we have as with scaling orgs, is to figure out, like I mentioned, like how do we evolve? Total addressable market eventually has to improve and increase basically. And people want to see that evolution that we have and be able to serving a larger audience. And we can't just serve this niche ska group anymore if we really want to have a profitable, marketable, big selling group. And that's the same situation we find ourselves in. Most new startups and SaaS orgs emerge solving a very specific problem for a very specific audience, which is excellent. And that makes you special and unique and have a really strong selling point. But then the next thing is on scaling. How do we do this for more people? And then you have such a risk of diluting what makes you special, what makes you, have this particular impact in a way to solve problems for that group if you try to expand. And it's super risky. It's such a risky area for you to get and try to do more, often with less, and still make a big impact. And so they were able to do that. They made, like we said, the right calls. And I think there's such a big risk and opportunity right now in this particular AI generative content era for trying to adapt and evolve really quickly, but super diluting your unique voice and what makes you special. And it seems like what they managed to do was stay with what makes them unique and special. It still sounds like them. They're still the ones creating the essence of what's good, but then being really strategic on how they execute and how they could actually expand their voice and message to larger audiences. And I think that's really the key right now, whenever you're infiltrated with a ton of opportunities to scale your content, to scale your marketing campaigns in front of a lot of people with a lot less investment, a lot less time on some of these generative AI tools. You have to really make sure that you're making the right bets on what is your long-term foundation. Like, GetResponse is bootstrapped. Like, we don't have a lot of money to be spending on paying for eyeballs to be able to experiment with some new potential idea or something that we think is going to get a lot of clicks or a lot of views, but that don't actually turn into something that's related to who we are and what makes us special. And so that's been that really big balance we have to have on the investments that we make with our time, with our money, and what's actually going to be foundational to still who we are, which is experts in email marketing, experts in helping folks who don't have a ton of budget to be able to stand up online marketing campaigns. And so that's why we're looking to, for example, AI tools to help us adopt this new technology, evolve the way we execute, but we're still doubling down on what makes us special, which is user-generated content, which is, unique research reports that are based on our own unique data, communicating boring regulations that come through, but we have to find a way to make them eye-catching for our users. And that's how we're, for example, adopting AI solutions to help us do those things more effectively, to help us do better user-generated, content campaigns based on scaling the way we generate that content, helping us analyze data more effectively so we can actually generate more of our kind of benchmark data on email marketing performance in a different way, because AI tools are excellent right now for helping us analyze data in a way that we never could before, much more quickly. And then, for example, Gmail and Yahoo came out with some new sender regulations with some deliverability requirements that are super dry, like only deliverability nerds, and sorry to say it, are into it, but it's a bummer to read about it, to try to figure it out. But our audience needs to know about those reports. They need to know about those changes. And so we invested in AI to actually help us generate a comic book. We experimented with a comic book kind of narrative in a way to educate our users with this information they needed to know, but in a way that's super boring. Nobody would ever read it. If it's just a long blog post or ebook, no way. Nobody's looking at it. And if we had actually in the past used our graphic design team or even hired somebody externally to create this comic book, it would have taken a lot of time, money, investment. But using an AI tool, we could still use our own content, what we wanted to communicate with our unique voice, but experiment with a new format, like a comic book based on, a Cold War spy narrative, to actually experiment with a new way to educate our audience on these pretty dry, boring topics. This is a way we're trying to figure out how to adapt and evolve with new technologies and way to be more efficient, but in a way that's still foundational, what we care about. And the content is still in our voice and our perspective. And that's what we're trying to, what we can mimic, for example, with No Doubt, right? With staying unique to who you are, what makes you special, but how can you get this to a wider group? How can you be more effective with the way you do it?
That's amazing. How did the comic book go?
It's going pretty good. I would still say YouTube was more effective, though, for getting that message across with those sender regulations, because that's just what we see is working. So it was definitely worth a shot with the comic book. Internally, it got a lot of buzz internally because we all talk about these regulations all the time. We all appreciated, I think, reading a Cold War narrative about, SPF records. But I would still say our audience ate it up in terms of short YouTube interactive content with somebody from GetResponse sitting down, leveling with them and telling them, here's what you need to know in, 95 seconds, basically. So, but it was still a cool example, and we'll keep trying.
I love that. Okay, third thing.
Cool. So third thing may not be explicitly in the way you execute on marketing or content marketing tactics, but I think we theoretically could talk about it also in terms of your employer branding, which often marketing teams do have quite a bit to do with that. And it's generally with your gender representation, right? As we've talked about, Gwen being kind of a, front woman for a male-dominated band, you know, a lot of dudes behind her, male dominated part of the music industry. But then when we think about that, a big part of our responsibility as leaders in organizations and leaders in marketing organizations is hiring top talent, keeping top talent, recruiting top talent. And so you need to be really thinking about representation that your brand has across your marketing channels. Who are your employee advocates? When people Google your brand, when people visit your brand's LinkedIn page, who is represented there? Do you have, you know, female leadership represented? Do you see female leaders in your organization? Because you really need to be thoughtful of that as a marketing leader on, you know, what are you putting forth in the representation of your brand? And I think it's just a great example and reminder. B2B tech is improving and making strides, but it has such a reputation that was well earned, I would say, as being definitely super boys club and not a lot of, you know, female representation, especially in leadership. I think it's improving, but I think it's just a really great example to be very mindful of the representation that you're putting forth in your channels. Some people may put it forth as part of their marketing strategy if it makes sense for their brand, but definitely I would say for your employer branding and recruitment strategy for keeping and hiring top talent, you should definitely keep that top of mind in terms of making sure you're being representative and diverse in your representation there.
Yeah, I love it. I think that specifically, you know, with regards to this type of content, I think that she's a freaking legend and like she needed the space to be able to do that, right? And, you know, sort of you need to be able to create opportunities and then get out of the way.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. She was destined for that role. No doubt. I keep like saying no doubt, and I don't mean to, but I guess I'm just like in the vibe of, and it just,
I think I say it all the time too. In my mind throughout this episode, I've been thinking that too. And I'm like, I think I just say the phrase no doubt. Okay. Before we get over to talking a little bit more about GetResponse marketing and all that, what are the first couple songs? What do you listen to in order?
I'm super glad you asked this question. So the classics, Don't Speak and Just a Girl, come on like within hour 1 and 2 of my working day. So the energy is high, super productive. We're feeling it and it's going well. And then we wind it down toward the end. And this It's My Life, which is a little bit later in their, you know, discography. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
You know, in their song repertoire come up pretty late in my day. The tank is about empty, productivity wise. I'm getting a little bit tired, but that one really brings me home. So definitely the classics stay at the top and then only their newer stuff as I wind down, I would say, which is, I think, kind of just representative of my relationship with their songs. So no doubt it's definitely a bright spot that brings me up. And when thinking about folks I'd like to talk about, and I can make parallels to my professional life, no doubt it's the choice, I would say, for my daily playlist.
Love that. Okay. Switching gears to GetResponse and the cool stuff that you're doing. Yeah, tell us your content and your overall marketing strategy.
So, you know, really like any marketing strategy or content strategy, it has to come, I think, from knowing the folks that you're putting things in front of. So that's the biggest thing we need to spend a lot of time with is researching, investigating, interviewing our customers to understand what's top of mind for them. And then also generally staying up with industry trends, with what's coming up from the folks that like Google, like Yahoo, like others that can impact our users and our audience. So we can be there to help translate for them the things that they need to know. So that's just like the kind of backbone of how we actually think about what type of content we'll create. And then, of course, it's just where are people? Where are our particular users and audience? And like I said, YouTube is something specifically for us, and we don't see it with other competitors as much, where we're doubling down because that's where our users are. We see them and they're not in these other channels. We don't see a lot of our competitors really existing there because for whatever reason, that their research is not indicating that, I guess, or that's not where their bet is. But that's where it is, right? Just the relevant message to the right audience in the format that they want it in. And then, like I said previously, it's about foundational stuff. We're really doing a lot of foundational things that we see year after year only help to facilitate and strengthen our brand. And so we've been doing internal original research report for 7 years, email marketing benchmarks report. We do it every year. It's been linked in people's dissertations. It's where we get a lot of backlinks. We get a lot of, you know, reputable content and sharing with this particular piece where it's sent for something we needed. What is the average open rate for a particular email? What is the best time? What is the click rate? Like, these are things we as email marketers who email marketing is a huge backbone of our own go-to-market strategy. We're asking questions and we're serving an audience of email marketers. We didn't have the answers. We were using a previous website before that used to provide this type of data, but then they stopped fueling it. And we're like, this is a gap. This is something that we personally need. And so for 7 years, this is something we do every year. It takes a lot of resources, but we have a lot of data. Like we've been around since 1998. We have a lot of data here, the historical trends related to how email marketing performs and how this is evolving over time. So this is something like an example of foundational stuff that we keep no matter what. We do a yearly marketers calendar, again, because we're marketers who need to plan our year. And what should we be talking about in different markets? What are the different holidays or marketing events that we should be using when we're a year prior trying to plan budgets? And when is the budget spend going to be happening based on different events that are happening? So this is just the example of being useful, being relevant, being helpful. And that's just like the backbone of what we execute on while we experiment with new things, while we experiment with a new way to communicate with people on YouTube about, real-time marketing events that are happening when things come down from regulators. But then we have this kind of drumbeat of what continues to be relevant for marketers no matter what. It's just that balance we try to create.
Yeah, and you've talked about how YouTube is working so well for your audience. Are you talking about, specifically ads on YouTube? Or are you talking about creating content on your own YouTube? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, like creating content, definitely creating content. I would say it's unique, new videos. Some are super short, some are a little bit longer. And so, we're experimenting with, paid advertising on YouTube, and it has its place and we're seeing some opportunities there, but it's strictly organic content. We've seen a lot of opportunities this year with AI. In particular, with talking to our audience about AI, because our audience, we could see, have this appetite to learn, should I be using it? It's a lot of kind of me too worrying. Am I missing the boat? Mm-hmm. How do I actually adopt this technology? So we were ranking really high for a lot of AI topics related to email. I think at one point we were number one for like AI email marketing at some point, because we were just trying to tell people, hey, here's what you can do in your email marketing strategy today that's going to be safe and going to save you time, related to experimenting with subject lines, for example. So AI was super great, as well as these Gmail, Yahoo regulations I mentioned. So things that people really have concerns about, they may have some anxiety or stress on how do I execute. We created organic content as early as possible to answer the question that people were searching in YouTube versus Google. So this is really our strategy to really start being in YouTube, answering these questions that people were searching for and being the first.
Love it.
And we were the first with AI and email marketing, and then these Gmail and Yahoo regulations that are really, a big deal for people sending marketing emails.
I love that. It's one of the things we've been working with our team, our SEO team, to do here at Caspian is just sort of get me on camera talking about answering all the questions that people have about making a podcast, building a podcast series, building a video series, like all these things that I'm like, I could tell you all this, research we've done and thousands of episodes that we've done, all this stuff. Or I could just tell you all the ways that, we think about it, and people are constantly trying to figure that stuff out. So yeah, that's cool. Okay, Abby, how do you think about ROI for your content?
Yeah, and that's definitely this balance of long-term results and then, let's say, executive leadership expectations on delivering product-ready revenue leads with a particular campaign. And so that's where we have to make these bets, and we have to kind of prove this evidential support for the longevity of these brand plays that we make related to our unique research that we execute for our industry, like our email marketing benchmarks or our annual marketing planner. We see qualitatively the way in which this is driving new customers, but it is a slow burn. It is not something we can launch and then start saying, okay, we now have this many more new free accounts that have converted into paid accounts. It's not the purpose or way in which we expect that content to perform. We've been doing these reports and a lot of this content for 7+ years. And like we've said with No Doubt and their Tragic Kingdom album, it takes 5 years for that to really catch on. And so now what we see through qualitative feedback, how did you hear about us surveys, different ways in which we interact with our customers. When we go to events, we hear, I heard about you because I had to research about report on how our email marketing was performing. Or I wasn't actually on the email marketing team, but we were looking up marketing campaign calendars and found your website, right? Like that's a type of thing that is that slow burns that is you can't measure effectively in marketing. And we are all so obsessed with marketing attribution. And I get it because it can take millions of dollars at some point to really grow a brand. And you want to understand what is working. But some of this stuff you just can't measure, and you have to take a bet and a belief that this is serving my audience. And that comes from really strong, robust research, interviews that you run with your target audience to say, this is the stuff they need to know. So we're not super into, sessions and things like reporting on, okay, this got this many eyeballs on our website. Like, cool. It's good for us to know that, but that's not something we're measuring specifically as an ROI on our investment. And we're super careful to talk about ROI on content marketing campaigns. A lot of it is really communicated as an experiment, as a test to see, and super linked to the funnel stage that we've associated with this piece of content supporting. So we do a decent amount of content with our content marketing team that is relatively bottom of funnel. We've identified people evaluating different email marketing software need to know these things. Competitor comparisons are super decent. Webinars with a partner that are specific about, evaluating our product to do a certain thing are super decent to start to see, do those lead to more signups? But the thing that really moves the needle for us now, years later, qualitatively, are these foundational brand-related content campaigns that we do related to our unique research and our kind of marketing campaign calendar that we hear people found out about us. And that stuff you just can't let go of. If we let go of those 2 campaigns in the next couple of years, we would feel it. We would definitely start to feel it, but we couldn't measure it. But it's just things that And that's a really frustrating part of being a marketer these days, but it's true for everybody.
Indeed. It definitely is. I totally agree that you just have to have a belief that this stuff needs to exist and that your company needs to have a point of view to educate and entertain and inspire your audience about that topic. Like you just have to believe that that's important.
Totally.
All right. What's one thing that y'all are working on right now?
Yeah. So definitely as a product marketing person on here and as being a product person, I'm pumped about a new product offering that we're cooking up. But the content side of me and the person that knows how important content is also really excited because of the angle and shape of what we're working on. Because as I've said, we've been in business since 1998. And what we've noticed since back then with our first customer was that content was the way they went to market. It was what they had to offer their audience. And we saw this really explode during the pandemic. We saw our user base really, like a lot of SaaS businesses, really grow during the pandemic. And what a lot of things had in common were that people were coming to us to market the content that they were creating for their audience, and specifically knowledge that they had, specific skills, experience, and expertise and knowledge that they had in any given field, and finding a way to package it and sell it to their audience. And so what we've really done is focused on, okay, we have this large community here of folks that are really trying to piece together a way to create digital products, to be able to create things that they can take their expertise, package it, market it, and sell it. But it's not that easy. It can take a lot of platforms. It can take a lot of solutions. It's not as easy as it could be or should be. And so that's something we're working on right now, specifically for content creators, specifically for folks who are just looking to have an easier way to be able to take the stuff they know how to do and put it in front of the folks with marketing tools that we've been offering since the 90s, and then making it easier to sell. And so I love that the backbone of this is understanding that content, ways in which you take ideas and package it in different formats and put it in front of folks, is the way you can actually create a business for yourself, create a side hustle. I love the freedom that content really provides people because it's just ideas. It's just people who have something to say. And I love that we're going to be able to provide that for folks that we've been serving for 25 years, but in a much more, I would say, active way, to be a part of that growth and a part of that creation versus just helping them market those kind of knowledge-based products that they come with. So this is definitely something that's coming super soon. And we're pumped to be able to play a much more active role in helping folks solve that problem and create new revenue streams for themselves.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I saw something the other day that they were talking about how, email marketing is more important than ever, despite how it's died about 50 times between the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And, we've been publishing our newsletter where we totally redesigned it about 3 months ago. And I just completely redesigned how we were doing it to just make it much more story driven, much more human centric, much more sort of my personal thoughts on the world rather than sort of like the classic company newsletter. And I can't even tell you how many people have hit me up who are just like, I freaking love your newsletter now.
Totally.
Yeah.
And in there, the inbox, your email inbox, which no doubt is flooded, I swear I didn't mean to do it, is flooded with unwelcome visitors, folks you didn't invite to your door.
Yep.
But there's also folks that you did invite, right? And you always open your door for them. That's what I love about the inbox. Like, I read email all day, and I don't like email. I'm on Slack all day to talk to my colleagues, but I go to email now to actually find offers I want.
Yep.
I so often go buy stuff because of emails I got.
Yep.
But I read a ton of stuff because I forget all the bookmarks I have on my browser. Like, I forget to go back to a blog post.
Yep.
But when they send it to my inbox, I get it again because it's my little home base. It's the only place I have that brings everything from my personal and professional life into one place. And it's just then our duty to be good email marketers to say, how do I stand out as one of those people that have been invited to that front door? And I love that challenge as a marketer. I love that challenge of being able to get them to open the door versus, the ones you would never open the door for, and you tell them to, never come back, go to the spam folder. I think it's such a cool challenge, and it's not going anywhere because we live our lives online, and the email inbox is still the one place that is specific gathering of all these different inputs online.
Yeah, and you need to create something worth opening. And if they do open it, you did all the work to get it to them, and they do open it, and they've subscribed to your newsletter and all that stuff. Like, it better be great.
Yeah.
It's like, have a higher bar.
Yeah.
Okay, Abby, what is one piece of advice that you would give to other marketers out there?
Yeah, I definitely would say that the one with the most customer insights wins. Doesn't matter what team you're on. It doesn't matter if you're product marketing or content marketing or product management or whatever. The one who knows what customers are feeling, what they're saying, what words they're using, you win. Basically, you have clout in a meeting. You have the most legitimacy. You should be really driving conversations, and you should do whatever it takes on your team to figure out how to be that type of person, to have access to your customers. It's such a bummer when teams and folks are gated from customers. And I get why, for relationship management and not to overwhelm customers with different asks, but you have to figure out a way to facilitate for folks on your team to learn from customers and to have contact with them, because those are the most effective people on your team. And that's what it is. Don't go a quarter, barely a month without talking to a customer, in particular one that is your ideal, the ones that like what you do and stay, and try to figure out how to get more of them. So that's forever and always my best recommendation for any marketer, is to know and have access to your customers.
Don't speak unless
unless it's a customer. Don't talk to anyone else.
Don't speak until you're listening to your customers. I was trying to think of a better no doubt pun. Well, this has been truly a wonderful episode. Thank you so much, Abby. We appreciate your time. For our listeners, you can go to GetResponse.com to learn more about all the cool stuff we're talking about and dig into some of those really cool resources. Specifically, we all are trying to figure out email marketing and how it's evolving over the next year or so. It's going to be a crazy new world that we're living in. So go to GetResponse.com to learn more. Abby, any final thoughts?
That's it. Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really fun to talk all things Gwen and No Doubt and email marketing. Just a trio of my favorite things. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, And our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.